Welcome, everyone, to our panel focusing on the role of next generation leaders on climate action. We've heard loud and clear during this meeting of this week that we are not on track to hit the Paris Agreement target of 1.5 degrees. We all know that. And publicly committing to net zero targets is easy, but delivering results, we also all know, is difficult. We've got to do better, and the question is how. We believe, and the discussion of this panel is the answer is leadership. Leaders need to lead. And we need more leaders to lead faster, to lead differently, and to lead with impact. Today's conversation is about the role of next generation of leaders. We can strike gold in accelerating progress by focusing more on the next generation who are ready, willing, and able to move into action. And why do I say that? Because at Russell Reynolds Associates, we recently completed a study on sustainability, covering 9,000 respondents across 11 countries. One of the most important results it revealed is that next generation leaders are fast becoming the engine room of sustainability action. And what great news is that? There are people in our organizations today who are already gaining firsthand experience on how to accelerate climate action. From the study, 40% of next generation leaders have taken on 3 or more initiatives to improve environmental outcomes for their organizations. And that is incredibly exciting. This is what we hope for, because it means when those leaders ascend the C-suite and when they become chief executives, they will have significant real-world experience delivering sustainability results. They will know what works and what does not. They will know how to innovate and to overcome barriers. They will know how to create followership to deliver results. They will know how to work with the right partner organizations, and they will know how to embed sustainability into business strategies, which is what is required. In other words, those future CEOs will know a lot more about how to deliver climate action than most of the leaders at the helm of our organizations today, and that is the exciting news. It offers us hope. We know we have not made the progress towards sustainability that we wanted to date, but we can accelerate climate action in a big way if we select, educate, reward, and retain the next generation of sustainable leaders. Joining me to discuss the important role that next-gen leaders can play in this race against the climate crisis, Chad Holliday and Laurence Dubourg. Chad is the former chief executive of DuPont, chairman of Shell, chair of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and currently the chair of what is called Mission Possible Partnership. It's a new organization focused on sustainably reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the 7 perhaps hardest to abate industries in the world: steel, cement, petrochemicals, aluminum, shipping, trucking, and aviation. Chad, you are a glutton for punishment, but we need someone to lead the way. Laurence is the former CFO of Heineken and currently a non-executive board director at Novo Nordisk, the Danish pharmaceutical company, noted for their accelerating leadership and their leaders around sustainable KPIs and progress. We're going to talk about how we identify these leaders, how we can develop them and set them up for success. Thank you, Chad and Laurence, for joining us today. I'd love to open with the first question, which is really about competencies. At Russell Reynolds Associates, we found in working with UNGC that the pioneer leaders of sustainable action, not pledge, but action, they all shared a few competencies why they're so successful. One is what we call multi-level systems thinking, really is dealing with the complexity of people, planet, and profit. And certainly disruptive innovation, not just innovation as we think about it, but shouldering difficult situations to press on, regardless of difficulty, to make progress. Others were about stakeholder influence and long-term activation. But as we look at the critical competencies of sustainable leaders, I would love to ask Chad first and then Laurence, what do you think are the competencies required to lead companies into a net zero era? What do you look for, Chad, and then Laurence?
So from my experience, you have to really get to know the leader. The process I'm most comfortable with is you spend an hour with them talking about what did they learn on the playground, what shaped them in their early lives, because what you'll find, their values were shaped then, and their receptivity to openness about change and this dynamic world you described, Clark, is very important. And have they had a combination of experiences where they had to take on some big challenges before, where all the answers weren't known, and they had to rely on more people to give them input? I think that's one of the big questions. I look back at their experience. Where did you have to rely on others because the answers weren't obvious? Because believe me, and this change around climate change, the answers are not obvious. And the opportunities are going to change as they already have in just the last 2 decades. So they have to have that receptivity, and they have to bring in more people that will challenge their thinking. And then they finally do have to make a decision and take a risk, because this is risky business. You will have to take risk, and they all won't work, but you have to be brave enough to do that.
Laurence?
First of all, I couldn't agree more with Chad. And indeed, you can't select people because they've done it already, because it is new, or it shouldn't be new, but the emphasis we put on it and the urgency that there is on it is really coming now, and meaning that you have to find people who are capable of tackling these issues, not people who have tackled them before, because there are too few of them. So you're going to look at capabilities, you're going to look also at qualities. And for me, it's going to be courage and intelligence in the sense of understanding of the world, which is very complex. So also willingness to go out and find the information, bring together the people that are able to collect this intelligence and to make it available to take decision. At the end of the day, the leader will have to carry decision. One good indicator for me is very often when the leader actually takes the blame for failure and actually praises the success on the team. And I find that in today's world, it's a very important quality to be able to understand that it is lonely at the top. And at the end of the day, it takes courage to make a decision where you don't know whether it's going to be right or wrong until afterwards, but to really collect the data, collect the fact, build the collective intelligence, and then have the courage to carry it.
I find that fascinating. You both said in different ways. First, the answers are not obvious, and intelligence to find the answers that are not clear. We at Russell Reynolds also say that dealing with ambiguity, and those who deal well with ambiguity today, to find answers that are not obvious is a critical factor, yet another competency. I'd be curious also, starting with Laurence, what do you think differentiates these next generation leaders from existing leaders? And you are involved with a company that is emboldened and identified and rewarding those next generation leaders to assume the C-suite. What do you think differentiates them?
I think the ability to really look for collective solutions and to starting from a real clear purpose. So the clarity of purpose, not as a communication exercise, but really as a deep soul searching of what the company is here for and what actually people want to be here for. And then from that, the ability to look for answer externally and to really have a bit of their ego in check in that sense. So for me, clarity of purpose, and then openness on how you actually get there, and ability to say, I don't know everything, I need some help, and I need to build collectively, is something that will differentiate. One thing I'd like to say is that we can't wait for next gen. I mean, we have to make sure that this gen leaders actually do it. The urgency is such that it's very important, and it's very reassuring, as you say, to know next gen is up at the door and knocking and saying you're not going fast enough. But we all have to reinvent ourselves as well, executive and boardroom. So it's important to also to dwell into who we are, to find what's needed now to make the whole thing progress.
Good, excellent point. Excellent point. We can't wait for those to arrive at the C-suite. Chad, your reflections on what you think differentiates them?
I believe they're scenario thinkers rather than point planners. The world is too dynamic today. And if you only have a point plan and that's how you do your planning, that's how you think, you're going to be disappointed. I recall when I was with Shell talking to the head of the U.S. Energy Agency, tell me what the price of oil is going to be next year. And he said $52, very in fact. In fact, I think he said $52 and change, exact change. I said, give me the range around that. Oh, somewhere between 20 and 97. So what it turned out is knowing the exact number wasn't really what was important. It was really, you have a really wide range and you have to have a scenario and plan. I found really next generation leaders seek input from different places. I know when we were at DuPont, we were dealing with really tough subjects that we knew had big environmental implications. We would bring in an NGO and they would work with our people to work on the solution to the problem. And it was always better after an NGO had challenged us. We couldn't do exactly what they said, but hearing their pushback was important. Another trick I used as a CEO, every year, twice a year, I'd go to a business school somewhere in the world and present the strategy for our company and let the students come back and push back on that strategy. And I learned a lot. I found, by the way, the students in China and South Korea gave me my best pushback of anywhere in the world.
There you go. Well, just following up on that, Chad, how do we identify these executives? How have you identified executives, both as a CEO and now two very, very important chair roles? How are you giving advice and helping others identify the future executives to around sustainability and climate change?
I got some advice when I was living in Japan. It takes about 3 weeks to learn your manager and about 3 years to learn your subordinate. So I always like to see, how does this leader in their current role project to their people? Does he or she listen? Do they seek input? Do they really like to have other? You can tell a lot by what people actually do in their current job to predict what they're going to do in the next job.
Maybe I would add that look at what their current team looks like. How do they surround themselves with diversity? And I'm not necessarily saying only the diversity that you can see, but the diversity of approaches, and how do they deal with dissenting opinions? The greatest leaders that I've seen are people who actually welcome dissenting opinions, so that after it's been expressed, even if it's not followed, everyone knows that they've been heard, and it's not that you cannot express it because anyway you have no chance to prevail. So looking at the shape of the team and the nature of the conversation, if you can be a fly on the wall during the management team meetings of this leader, tells you a lot.
No, just pulling upon that and challenges. In your former role, you were very active in looking at what could be done differently. Uses of water in the beverage business, water use is significant. As you looked at developing leaders, particularly around sustainable operations and the culture of sustainability, which the company was extremely good at doing, what are your lessons learned about how you can develop the leaders around sustainable topics, issues, and the change of operations, as it were?
Making sure that you position leaders around the sustainable topics that you feel have the greatest potential in the company, and that you send those signals. Usually in a company, there are some kind of like whispering of who has CEO potential. I mean, most of the time everyone's wrong and then things happen differently. However, there are always some whispering. And, if you have at the top role of sustainability, someone whose people say, this person, man or woman, can be tomorrow a head of business or one day a CEO, then that changes the dialogue. So that is something that is important. And then making sure that sustainability is by design, not as the last paragraph of any fund application on our investment. By the way, how does it do on sustainability? But that it's really integrated and that nothing will be done that will not be sustainable. It is a journey because it conflicts with the whole budgeting thing, it conflicts with the limits in terms of investment, but making sure you make very visible decision where you say, we are going to build these wastewater treatment. We are going to do that, even though it's going to cost more than what we had decided to spend. We're going to do it because that's essential. So for me, it is who you place in the job and what signal you send in terms of resource allocation, human and money resources.
I like the message. I love that. Chad, you've led and governed companies in 2 industries that are dirty. And how did you identify and develop people around the sustainable topics? And what is your advice now that you're a chair and a board member about developing executives against these issues?
So you had to find executives that could deal with those dirty industries. Still provided a lot of value to human beings. They made products that were very important. So how can you have an executive that understands that, but doesn't stand behind that and say, well, then we can't do the right thing for the environment? You have to have an executive that knows both are essential. And if you look at the decisions they make themselves, so as they bring you a proposal, does that proposal already take it into account? Or have they just gone through the checklist and checked all the boxes around the environment? Or have they really thought differently about how they go about it? A dialogue around it, you can tell, are they sincere and looking for solutions where it's truly a win-win? Because there are a lot of solutions out there if we just do it.
Can I just maybe sorry, from the data and digital, what I found when I was working at Heineken, I was amazed how many talents we could attract from the digital world, while actually we were not a digitally native company. And what we realized is that if you're really serious in transforming, then people would come to you, because if it's a hard to change industry, if it's a non-native industry in that topic, it's amazing if they manage, they can have a huge impact. So I think in terms of environment, it's a bit the same, if you go into a company in a hard to abate industry, and that company is serious and you can actually help transform that, you're doing maybe much more for the world than doing it where it's easy. So I think we also need to reward that, and to reward that also from a, I would say, pride point of view, people being proud of being there and helping these very important industries, chemical, oil, energy, to actually transform themselves, because that's where maybe you can have the most impact.
Let me just build on with an example of what you just said. Yeah, I'm on the board of John Deere, and we're doing a lot using digital technology to reform agriculture. So it's much better for the environment the way we do it. And I was very concerned, can we attract these people that love digital? We can attract them and hold them much better, because they can see the result of what they're doing, and more than just clicks and selling more of something. This is really making a difference for the environment. Now, I must have to say that we did have to put a little plot of corn and soybeans and cotton in front of the building so they would know what it looked like. So they had to pass by it every day on the way in so they could relate to it.
But you could see the progress in such essential industries that the digital digerati could see results and create results for John Deere.
They cared more about it. They were more dedicated. They were still going to work till midnight, even though we weren't paying them outrageously, because they could see the benefit of what they're doing. It's made really great results too.
So on this concept of reward, and I agree with you, Chad, rewarding is both financial and intangible. And of course, on this topic, the intangible is tremendously more powerful, and these generations care more about the intangible than the financial. I would love to ask both of you, how do you see rewards, tangible or intangible, as motivating factors? Your reflections, first Chad and then Laurence.
Yeah, I was thinking about the first part of the way you asked the question, and I related to a conversation I had counseling someone yesterday, who I was talking to about changing to a different role. And yet he was working on Mission Possible stuff, and he was so into it. He said, I know this is just a good equal job, but doesn't have the meaning. And I'd rather stay in this job no matter what I could do, because I want to complete this task. It's really important to me. So I think there are more people like that today, maybe than there were 20, 30 years ago when I was starting a business. So I think we got to have that piece in place. At the same time, we should reward for results. So I think it should, if we could get a little bit away from all these calculations of what the bonus should be, and really use good judgment when somebody has really reached out and made something happen, and make sure we reward them appropriately and be able to defend that judgment.
Laurence?
It all comes down to the definition of performance. And if we're serious about making the definition of performance more holistic than just financial result, it needs to incorporate, the remuneration needs to incorporate, and the bonuses in particular need to incorporate an element from sustainability. By the way, I know very little people who would do just something stupid because it is in their KPIs to get to a bonus. most people actually want to do well. However, in any case, if you don't remunerate for something, it might mean to them that you don't take it seriously. So for me, it needs to get into the reward system.
Great point. Fantastic. And Laurence, what's the role of the board on these topics, and the board versus the chief executive? And I happened to have led a panel a few hours ago on this very topic, and I'll just summarize what came out of this group of directors. They felt that the board had to maintain a level of urgency and discomfort for management, because there are many things that are not as visible, or as one American said, not in your face, very, very American, that you have to understand and react to, such as changes in supply chain around sustainability. And the other was that the board said to encourage competitors to work together collaboratively within industries, to the point of what Chad is doing with Mission Possible. And the board would need to reinforce this sense of discomfort and looking at alternative ways to create action, even with one's competitors. What do you think is the role of the board versus management here? And I don't mean to create tension, but to create an approach of a board's role versus the executive team.
I think there are very clear roles in terms of governance, and the board has a role to play in terms of house in order. So first of all, I'm going to take my nerdy CFO hat and then say, if we're going to report, if we're going to issue KPI, the board and the audit committee also has a responsibility in looking at it and making sure that the system is well put and well organized, and there is some rigor to it. That's evidently not the most important. That's the house in order, but there is much more than that. I don't really like that notion of creating discomfort, because I do think discomfort is here, and that as boards, we are not here to create more discomfort, but to make sure that we use our collective intelligence for the sake of the company and its stakeholders, starting with shareholders and much wider than that, and make sure that management knows that it is important. It is an important part for the governance. It's an important piece of what they have to do. And yes, challenge constructively, but for me, it's less about discomfort than about putting the collective intelligence of a group of people who have been assembled from many different industries, and don't try to outsmart each other by who's asking the most difficult question, but really try to get to more collective intelligence to actually support and help the company move forward. So for me, there is a huge role of the board, because I'm sure, I know it's lonely for the executive. It's a complex issues. And when we're saying we need to do profitability and the rest, it's one more layer of constraint that we put and of pressure we put on them. So we're also here to make sure that they don't lose track and that they actually also don't lose courage.
Chad, your reflections on the board's role here?
Well, if you look at global warming and the climate change it's causing, it's the most difficult problem any company has ever faced. And we don't know the answers yet. So you need to approach it with that in mind. This is not just one more environmental problem. This one's really serious. I believe you need to assign it to a committee. I think if you try to do it as a whole board, the whole board's responsible and should review it, but you need to have a committee, and the committee's got to have enough time to really dig into it. It can't be one more item on the audit committee agenda. It's got to be a critical item on the audit committee agenda. I find one thing is, where does it occur on the agenda? Is it first or is it last? So it gets a little bit shorter time. I think there's a lot of things you do to send the message. And on this topic, I chaired a sustainability committee for a company once, and the staff would come and they would talk, and we sensed they were telling us we weren't getting the CEO support they needed. Even though the words were all great, they really weren't getting the support. So we had to invite the CEO to come join our committee. And at first, he wasn't so sure he should come, that he didn't report to this committee, he reported to the whole board. We said, we'd really like you to come. So we'll buy you lunch if you show up. And so that started a dialogue that we helped the CEO understand what he should be doing in this range. And it made a tremendous difference. So the board should make management feel just a little bit uncomfortable. And then critically too, once you got the CEO feeling uncomfortable and he or she is really leading, you better back them. You better be serious with it.
There you go. The last question, if you had one piece of advice as a board leader for a chief executive going into 2022 around this topic of climate change and next gen leadership, what would your piece of advice be? Laurence?
Educate yourself to the topic. Really, it's not work on it. Work on what is the impact. Educate yourself even to the technical aspect of the topic, and make sure you educate your board, and make sure the board collectively goes on education sessions, which we all do, but that needs to be a topic of the education sessions for me.
Chad, your piece of advice going into next year?
I would second that. I think the education is exactly what I would say first, and it's really critical for the board and management. And then the people you put in charge of this, make sure you trust them, you have great confidence in them, because you're betting your company on it. So select very carefully the people you put in charge, so you will listen to them and follow their advice.
Well, a great way to end as we think about next generation leaders is select those that importantly, and give them focus and visibility. That's one of the most important decisions. If I could just summarize for those of you, thank you for all joining us. Summarize a little bit of, so what have we taken away from this? The answers are not obvious. They're complex. So have courage to find the answers. They may not be directly in front of you. Have the courage. Have the openness that you don't know it all, nor do the next generation of leaders, though they're very passionate about it. And we need those leaders, but don't rely just on them. Reinvent yourself today. The world needs you to reinvent yourself. A one-point plan or following the exact path to this will be the absolutely wrong way to do it. You need scenario thinkers, scenario planning to know what your optionality is or worst case scenarios. And challenge yourself to think from different places. Who will challenge you the best for you to be the best as a leader on this topic of sustainability? The current team, make sure you have diversity, not of classic diversity, but dissenting opinions, back to this concept of challenging from new angles. And from a development standpoint, make sure that the message is sent to the organization that the highest potential executives are involved with sustainable issues. Project the message. Make sure it is clear this is a way to the top and a way for success. This journey may cost money. Make sure you're seen as investing. And already make sure you're taking in the environmental solution to a problem. Make sure that when someone comes up with an initiative or a strategy, have they already embedded sustainability into that strategy, because they are the executives who perhaps will win. And reward those for taking on the tough issues. That reward is important, as well as pride, the tangible and the intangible. That defining performance and defining the measurements of value creation of sustainable efforts is very important. So we've developed them, identified them, seen them as high potential. Well, let's reward them to show their high potential so they understand. And challenging positively, not negatively, on these topics, back to what we said before. And is it first or last on the board agenda? I think we all know the answer. If we're attending this week here, we know that where it should lie in the agenda. And select the next generation of executives to take on those first agenda topics. Chad and Laurence, you have firsthand experience, you have strong opinions, and you have been fantastic panelists. We need more of you and positive challenges and leading leaders. Thank you both for joining us today. Thank all of you who have listened and watched, and we look forward to having this discussion more in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care, Chad. Thank you, Laurence.